Hi, welcome back. Some people play Honkai Star Rail completely casually. They stay out of the meta, pull for whoever they like, and they don't really care about clearing the MOC. Others are more competitive, but instead of relying on the game's microtransactions, they instead rely on the jades they can farm to pull for the meta characters they need. Then other players say, "F you, I'm rich," and pull for every single character until they get multiple copies. Today we're going to look at the best 5-star character eidolons on Honkai Star Rail. First looking at E1s and E2s, and then at the end I'm going to give a list of my favorite E6s in the game. When looking at E6s, by the way, I'm going to look at every single eidolon, of course. So if a character is in one of these lists, they won't be in the other. Before we start, you should like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this in the future, and join the Express Train Discord server for a community filled with content like this. By the way, only 6.3% of everyone watching is subscribed, so you should do your part and click that button right now. I usually make guides for casuals mainly, but I thought making this list would be a lot more fun. I'm also going to do a lot of comparing in this video because I think it's fun too, and because people get very mad when you start comparing. So let's get into the best E1s and E2s in the game right now. Number 1, by the way, these are in no particular order, Robin's E1. Now, Robin's E1 is genuinely one of the best E1s in the game. The biggest difference between Robin and Ruan Mei, and what really makes them very closely matched in my opinion, outside of the 100% advanced Robin has, is Ruan Mei's resistance penetration that she gives everyone with her ult. With Robin's E1, you get that resistance penetration, then 4% more on top of that. You could say, well, just get Ruan Mei's E1 too, and then they become closely matched again, but Ruan Mei's E1 is just 20% defense ignore, which isn't really comparable at all to Robin's 24% resistance penetration at E1. Robin's E2 isn't that good, however, as it's just a little extra energy and 16% speed to everyone. If you were going to pull copies at all, I'd stop at E1 unless you're an E6 Mega Whale. Robin's E6 is definitely something. It kinda reminds me of Yelan's C6 in Genshin. If you're gonna pull any other 5-star Harmonies eidolons, then Sparkle and Ruan Mei get around the same upgrade from their E2s. Both of them get an extra 40% attack they give everyone, and then Ruan Mei gets the aforementioned 20% defense ignore, and Sparkle gets an extra 24% defense ignore added to her talent's buffs. However, I should add that since Sparkle already has some attack buffs, then if you're using a mono quantum team, you're not going to benefit as much from that 40% attack that she provides with her E1 because of diminishing returns, since one of her traces already provides a certain attack percentage based on how many quantum characters are on the team. Number 2, Jingliu's E1 and E2. Some of my favorite eidolons in the game are Jingliu's E1 and E2. E1 basically turns her into a hunt character when only one enemy is on the field. Instead of the adjacent target damage from her enhanced skill and ultimate being wasted if there's only one enemy, you can basically think of it as diverting into that single target enemy, blowing up her damage on single targets by a ton. Her E2 also increases her next enhanced skill's damage after using her ultimate by 80%, which is insane. I'd say you could get around the same damage increase, maybe more, from Yunli's E1 and E2. Yunli's E1 increases the ultimate counter damage by 20% and increases the amount of times the enhanced counter triggers damage by 3, while her E2 allows it to ignore 20% of the enemy's defense. It's like having a Ruan Mei E1 without the Ruan Mei E1, except it's an E2 instead. Now, you may get more from Yunli, I just think Jingliu's is a lot more fun, especially because it gets you closer to her E6, which is very fun. Number 3, Firefly's E1 and E2. I've never seen a bigger upgrade of quality of gameplay, or easiness of use I guess you could say, from a character's eidolons than Firefly's E1 and E2. Her E1 allows her enhanced skill to ignore 15% defense, but also when using her enhanced skill, it does not consume skill points, making Firefly one of the most skill point positive characters in the game. Her E2 also gives her an extra turn every other turn when she breaks an enemy's weakness or defeats an enemy, giving her around an extra 50% damage. Another character's eidolons that give them an extra turn is Dan Heng's E2, as E1 and E2 give them such an upgrade that some people even meme about him being bricked until you get E2 Dill. It's me, I'm one of those people. His E2 advances his action forward by 100% when he uses ult and gives him an extra 1 of his free skill points. Very, very nice. Number 4, Jade's E1. Now, Jade's E1 is a little special. Instead of giving her a small upgrade to what she already does, it allows her to do things a lot differently, just like Jingliu, I guess. So Jingliu's E1, as we said, basically turns her into a hunt character when there's just one enemy on the field. And Jade's E1 increases the amount of charge stacks when an enemy is attacked, basically making the minimum amount of charge stacks you can gain 3 at all times, no matter how many enemies are attacked. This creates some very fun opportunities for some very fun, interesting team comps with Jade and Fei Xiao. Jade can increase Fei Xiao's speed by 30%, 40% and then start dealing infinite follow-ups together. I really want to see that happen, but I have neither E1 Jade nor Fei Xiao. Maybe on the next banner, I guess. This E1 also allows Jade to be pretty damn viable in the MOC, at least a lot more viable than she is at E0. It's definitely on my wish list. Gonna sell my soul to Jade in exchange for daily whipping sessions.
It should have been me, not him!
Number 5, Zhao Qiu's E1 and E2. I spent the whole past 1.5 months advocating that Zhao Qiu is good but not worth it, but one thing that always stood true throughout this whole period is that his E1 and E2 are absolutely busted. They're absolutely some of the biggest Eidolon upgrades any character in the game can have. E1 makes it a little easier to get Ash and Rose stacks to the max amount, but also increases damage taken by enemies by an extra 40%. His total buff without E1 is 35% increased damage for all attacks and 50% increased damage for ultimates. With this, you just add on 40% and then say goodbye to all enemies. His E2 is also insane because it increases his DOT multipliers by 300%. At E0, Black Swan is 100% better than Zhao Qiu for DOT, but when both are at E2, I'd say they are very evenly matched. Black Swan's E1 reduces resistance for the corresponding elements of any applied DOTs by 25%. This of course increases the damage of both DOTs and attacks of the corresponding elements, meaning it works with something like Acheron's ultimate. And if both are E1, then Black Swan is still better because resistance reduction is OP. Her E2 just makes it a lot easier to stack Arcana by applying 6 stacks of Arcana on enemies adjacent to a defeated enemy. Since her E2 doesn't actually increase her damage multiplier at all, when comparing both these characters' E2 they are incredibly evenly matched, and if you're gonna go for either of their E2s, then for DOT I'd go for absolutely either of them. Whichever one of them is your favorite character, I would go for Black Swan since she's hot. For something like an Acheron team, while Black Swan's resistance reduction works for Acheron, it only works either when you're using Kafka with her or when Black Swan's Epiphany from her ultimate is applied. So you're either sacrificing further debuffing for Kafka, or you're sacrificing a lot of uptime. So for Acheron, I'd pull Zhao Qiu's E1 over Black Swan's E1. Unless you really want to make a Dotcaron team, then go for Black Swan's E1. Now that's 5, or more if you count the comparison characters, of the best E1s and E2s in the game. Let's get into my favorite E6s in the game. By the way, if you've got any favorite Eidolons of your own, make sure to talk about them down below. Number 1, Boot Hill. Let's talk about Jing Liu's E1 one more time. While it turns her from a destruction character to a hunt character when there's only one enemy at the field, Boot Hill's E6 instead turns him into a destruction character. He doesn't necessarily follow the path of destruction, he just destroys absolutely everything in his path. Combining his E6 that turns him into an AoE DPS with all the buffs he gets from his E1, E2, and E4, he goes all cowboy on their candy asses and takes them down not one by one, but all at once. He goes from doing 800k damage single target to 800k on each target. Though even with how strong it is, I still don't think it's as strong as Acheron's E6. Not that you need to measure E6 strength though, with any 5-star E6 you're gonna destroy the game. Yes, even E6 Zila. So anyway, number 2 is Acheron's E6. It does the obligatory 20% resistance penetration almost every single 5-star E6 has, but instead of being just lightning, it instead is all type resistance penetration. It also converts her basic attack and skill damage into ultimate damage as well, which of course will get extra damage from her E4, which increases ultimate damage taken by all enemies by 8%. E4 also puts that debuff on any enemy entering the battlefield, which I think means she gets her stacks faster when enemies simply enter the field. Zhao Qiu is quaking, shaking in his boots right now. Let's also not forget her E2, which eliminates the need for 2 annihilated characters. Acheron's E6, in my opinion, is one of the most busted E6s in the game. You can do millions upon millions of damage with it, not in this immunity but also in all the other endgame modes. Then at number 3 we have Fei Xiao's E6. Her E1 increases her ult damage, her E2 makes it a lot easier to stack up flying Arias, her E4 makes it easier to break weaknesses and increases her speed by 16% after doing 2 follow-up attacks, and of course her E6 makes her go absolutely bonkers. Just like Acheron, she also gets the obligatory resistance penetration, but also just like Acheron, instead of it being just wind resistance penetration, it's all type resistance penetration. What's with the stacking alt characters being so incredibly overpowered? Her E6 also converts her talent FUA to do ultimate damage as well, and increases its multiplier by 140%. This means you're going to do hundreds of thousands of damage every single follow-up attack. You don't even need to do her burst at this point, just do it for the shits and gigs maybe. Now, while nobody ever pulls for sustained Eidolons unless they're absolutely insane or crazy about the character, But at number 4 we have Fushuan, Aventurine, and Lingsha. Fushuan and Aventurine Z6s just turned them into DPS characters. I'm sure you've seen those beta tests of Aventurine Z6 when he first came out. He's absolutely insane with it. Fushuan is less so, but I still wanted to include her because it would be fun doing nukes with her ultimate. Lingsha is a little different though. She reduces 20% all-type resistance from all enemies and also turns into a DPS character herself because her little rabbit starts doing bounce attacks too. I wonder what putting these 3 characters together would be like, an immortal team that is both an unstoppable object and an immovable force. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Like the video if you liked it, comment what you want to see next down below, and subscribe. Join the Express Train Discord server as well for a community filled with content like this. You should go watch a couple of the videos on screen right now. I just posted a video of Topaz's pull value for Facial with Moza and Hunt March in the picture, so you should go check that out. Anyways, I will see you next time.